We want to continue our story of God's mission, and this week look at God's choice of Abraham and the Israelites as a nation for the nations. We need to remember the context that we looked at last week. The first, in that context, we noted that in Genesis 1 through 11, there is a tension in creation. God created both humanity and creation as good, and he asks them to choose to honor him as God or to choose to assert themselves as God. That's the basic tension. Will we be knowers of good and evil, or will we honor God as the only knower of good and evil? The impact of humanity asserting itself as a knower of good and evil is that sin and destruction and violence affect individuals and families and nations and even the environment. But God is committed to this open-ended, risky mission that he has set about to bring about the fruition for creation, to assert and to put into existence this idea that creation is good. But the goodness of creation is when it honors God as God. And so God, in the context of Babel, now needs a partner through whom he can reach the various nations. And so we come to Genesis 12, where God chooses Abraham. He says, "The Lord said to Abram, 'Leave your country, your people, and your father's household, and go to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all the peoples on earth will be blessed through you.'" It's important that we note a couple of things. First of all, although the focus of this passage is on Abraham, the bigger focus is on the fact that God is still concerned with all nations. He is choosing Abraham as the vehicle through whom he will reach all nations. Abraham will be the conduit, the special representative of God among the nations. But the mission of God is not to save Abraham. It is to reach all nations, and Abraham will be his partner. He is choosing one nation among all the scattered Babel nations through whom he will reach the rest. The mission is that Abraham will demonstrate what it means to live life where we honor God as God. We honor God's knowledge of good and evil, his decisions about what it means to live a truly human and fulfilled life. The fulfillment of God's creation intent is to honor God as God. So there are two imperatives. The first is that Abraham must go. He is to leave his country, and he is to go. Much like what we saw in Genesis 1 through 3, where there is a desire and a command to fill the earth with the image and representation of God, here Abraham is asked to keep going. Go and fill the earth. Abraham cannot reach all nations without leaving where he is settled. But he also cannot fulfill the mission of God unless he honors God as God. Abraham is called to be a blessing. The blessing is that as God blesses Abraham, the nations will also be blessed. It is reflexive, so that Abraham will be a blessing to others as he himself has been blessed by God. The world will know God as Abraham knows God, in obedience and in ethical imitation of who God is. In this partnership, the first story we encounter with Abraham as God's partner is the story of Sodom and Gomorrah in Genesis 18. So the setting is that God has heard the outcry of injustice and oppression. The result of humanity asserting itself as knowers of good and evil has infected yet another town. And God has heard the outcry. But rather than go it alone and just enact a punishment on Sodom and Gomorrah, God involves Abraham. Abraham is God's partner. And so he asks Abraham to reason with him about what it means to enact justice and righteousness. Notice this passage in Genesis 18 and following. Abraham will indeed become a great nation and a mighty nation, and all the nations on the earth will find blessing through him. For I have known or chosen him for the purpose that he will teach his sons and his household after him, so that they will keep the way of Yahweh by doing righteousness and justice. For the purpose that Yahweh will bring about for Abraham what he has promised to him. Notice that there is a purpose in Abraham's ethics. Abraham is to teach his family to know God as God. And that ethical life will enable God to bless all nations through Abraham. The ethical living that God has called Abraham to enact is not the goal of Abraham's call. Rather, it is a necessary condition for Abraham to fulfill his mission to the nations. It's also not the reason that Abraham was chosen. Abraham was not chosen because he is ethical. He is chosen to be ethical so that he can fulfill the mission that God has given him. The mission of doing justice and righteousness. Conformity with what is expected in the relationship between humanity and God, and restoring it, justice, restoring righteousness when it is violated, determining what is the right path back. So, the question in Sodom and Gomorrah that Abraham enters into this reasoning posture is seen in the interaction that Abraham takes up with God. Abraham asks God, will God destroy the righteous along with the guilty? The question is, will God be just? Or is he going to be wiping out both the good and the evil? And so Abraham explores this ethical question with a series of his what-if questions. What if there are a certain number of righteous? Will God still just move forward and not be just? And the answer is no. God will be just. Justice and righteousness are not exact prescriptions. And so Abraham reasons about what it's going to look like in the towns of Sodom and Gomorrah. But in doing that, what we notice is that Abraham has taken up his role as a priest. He is arguing on behalf of the people. He is arguing for God to be just and righteous among the people. In the end, God will not sweep away the guilty. No, he will sweep away the guilty. He will not sweep away the righteous. And so Abraham is God's partner, representing the people before God, but also representing God to the people.